Palak, am I audible? Hello?
Yes, Sugandha, you can.
Yeah. Sure. Okay, I'll start. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of TERI, I, Sugandha Research Associate from Transport and Urban Governance Group, would like to welcome you all to our closing webinar on Namma Auto Project, Learning and Reflections. This webinar aims to disseminate the learnings from Namma Auto project and further deliberate on the ways this project can be replicated and scaled in other Indian cities. Before we start the session, I would like to have your attention. And for panelists, it will be great if you could just mute your microphones when you're not speaking. And also you can turn off the camera if there is network issue and video is freezing. So we have received a lot of questions during the registration process. We'll try to accommodate during Q&A session. We will also try to accommodate questions from the participants who can raise their questions via chat box. I would like to give a brief introduction of the project under which we had conducted the webinar series. The project is switching to a sustainable auto rickshaw system, also known as Namma Auto project in common language. The study is being funded by the European Union Switch Asia program. Under the project, TERI, along with other partners, including Founders on Accra and Foundation, Women Health and Development, WAD, has been working on for improving the livelihood of the drivers, auto drivers, and enabling the transition to electric auto rickshaws in cities of Bangalore and Chennai. Now, moving towards the discussion, I would like to invite a moderator for the session, Mr. Shri Prakash. Presently, sir is a distinguished fellow in Transport and Urban Governance Group of TERI. Sir joined TERI in July 2011 as Distinguished Fellow after a long distinguished service in Indian Railways. He is very closely associated with the Auto project and is also the member of steering committee of the project. He has lead various projects related to informal transportation systems, and his specializations include operations, planning, zero-emission technology, and safety of the transportation systems. Welcome to you, sir. Coming to the panelist, our first speaker will be Mr. S.P. Patil. Sir has been serving as the Additional Transport Commissioner, State Transport Department of Karnataka. Sir will be joining us shortly. Our next speaker is Mr. C K Shreenath. Sir has been designated as the Deputy General Manager under the Division of Smart Grid and Electric Vehicle in Bangalore Electricity Supply Company Limited, BESCOM. Welcome to you, sir. Next, I would like to introduce Professor Dr. Sanjay Gupta in our panel. Presently, sir is the head of Department of Urban Planning and also a professor in Transport Planning Department in the School of Planning and Architecture, SP in New Delhi. He was the honorary secretary of institutes like the Chartered Institute of Transport and the Institute of Urban Transport India in the past. Sir is also chairing and a member of several committees of Ministry of Urban Development, DDA, ITPI, and other reputed organizations. Sir specializes in the area of transport planning, public transport, freight logistics, demand modeling, and transport policy related aspects. Welcome to you, sir. Our next speaker is Mr. Abhishek Saxena. Sir is a public policy professional. Presently, he is working as a young professional in the transportation domain at NITI Aayog, Government of India, and is a part of a team charting India's clean mobility revolution. Prior to this, Sir was a part of vibrant startup community in India, such as Flipkart and Sapient. He has done his Masters of Business Administration from IIT Delhi and Bachelor's of Technology in Computer Engineering from National Institute of Technology, Kurukshetra. Welcome to you, Mr. Saxena. Next, I would like to introduce Mr. Alekhya Datta. He is working as a fellow and area convener in electricity in TERI. Sir is working on a grid integration aspects of renewable energy and microgrids, implementation of battery energy storage systems, and vehicle to grid concept through virtual power plants in electric vehicles. He is also an active member of committee working groups formulated by Government of India through the Ministry of Power, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, NITI Aayog, BIS, and Central Electricity Authority. Welcome, sir. Now, I would like to invite a presenter for the session, Ms. Manju Menon. She represents Founders on Accra, an Italian international NGO in India, where she steers a consortium partners in Namma Auto project. Welcome to Ms. Manju Menon. Now I will request our moderator to begin with this discussion ahead. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Sugandha. As Sugandha explained that this is the third and final of the series on the auto rickshaws. Now this in the final webinar, we would like to discuss about the project which that has been conducted for last 4 years under uh, the Manju's leadership, Manju Menon's leadership, and she would be giving us the details of that, what has been the learning, what have been the reflections, of the particular project. At the same time, that we have got some distinguished panelists who would be also talking about auto rickshaws and particularly on the whatever the learnings have been achieved in this project. Now, the auto rickshaws are very important mode of the transport in our cities, and they are. I mean, there is no denying the fact that almost all the cities would stop functioning if the auto rickshaws are out of the city. But at the same time, because they are also hated, in the sense that they are causing congestion, so that is why the regulators don't like them. Secondly, that there are various complaints about the overcharging, refusal of the going to a particular destination, and all this, that which is affecting. But at the same time, that if you do not have the auto rickshaws, then people may not be able to go to the railway stations, that is the first mile and last mile connectivity, or the bus stations, as well as that they are the most suitable mode of transport for the short distance and the distance, say, up to the 15 kilometers. They are cheap and they are easily available also, so that is not a problem. Now, uh, what at this stage I would like to invite Manju to talk about the project, and then she would give a small presentation also. And then afterwards, we will invite our distinguished panelist to speak on this subject. Manju will take about 10 minutes for the presentation, and I'll request the panelists to be brief, the brief for say 5 minutes, 4 5 minutes, for with the comments on the project, as well as the whatever the Manju has stated, as well as their own thoughts. Now, Manju.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I'll just share my presentation. Is it audible? Can you see the screen? Yeah. So many thanks to the colleagues from TERI who is organizing this webinar. As the context of this webinar is basically that this project, which has been running since 2016 with the funding from Switch Asia program of the European Union, is coming to a closure. And we are taking this occasion to share with you a few things that we learned in the process of implementing this particular project. And on behalf of the entire consortium, I would like to also take this opportunity to thank a lot of stakeholders who have been associated with us in the process of implementing this particular project in Bangalore and Chennai. I would like to quickly take the audience today in terms of what this project was supposed to achieve, or what was the goal of this particular project. So we intended to look at a replicable and sustainable auto rickshaw transport system, which is based on clean technologies. So shifting to clean technologies was one of the primary mandate. We also thought that environment-friendly auto rickshaws should be integrated to mass transit. It's not that it is not integrated yet, it's that it is not officially, or rather systematically happening, and how to make it a preferred mode of choice for personal last mile connectivity. And at the same time, being a Switch Asia project, which has a mandate of reducing poverty, we were specifically looking at the ways and means of improving the livelihood status of the auto rickshaw drivers. And in that process, we have been contributing, this project has directly contributed to several sustainable development goals. Especially, this has been designed under the Goal 12, which is on sustainable consumption and production. So just to give you a glimpse of the stakeholders, as I was mentioning, the Switch Asia program has been the donor of this particular project. And we were a consortium of 4 organizations led by ACRA, including NBU Netherlands, Women Health and Development, which is a non-profit in Bangalore, and TERI, which has been implementing this project in the last 4 years. And in addition to that, we had several enterprise partners, the primary ones being Three Wheels United. And we also set up an auto rickshaw cooperative society as a part of this particular initiative, and an NBFC which Three Wheels United has been supporting to offer low-cost financing to electric auto rickshaws specifically. This has been the internal stakeholders, to be precise, and obviously the auto rickshaw drivers were a critical part of it. We also, in the process, have worked very, very closely with different manufacturers and OEMs in the auto rickshaw sector, insurance agencies, financial institutions and banks, the rickshaw unions, and the metro rail companies. We also have collaborated with the government departments and policy bodies, including the transport department. Various academicians and researchers have collaborated with us during this process. Several non-profit and civil society organizations have been consulted during the implementation of this project. And of course, a significant part of the project was also interacting and understanding the preferences of auto rickshaw passengers in both the cities. The way we had envisaged this project was to look at both demand and supply in the auto rickshaw sector and see that how do we create more demand for green auto rickshaws, and at the same time, how do we trigger a positive shift among the users when they start demanding the need for cleaner rickshaws in the cities. And that essentially includes having clear policy frameworks. So a good bit of work has been done on identifying policy and regulatory gaps and seeing how that can be made better. And in that process, we realized that we need to do a lot of pilots and frameworks. So we had been doing some pilots, and some of them I'll be reflecting upon in terms of what our learnings have been as a part of those pilot initiatives. So a good bit of our work, as I said, was revolving around auto rickshaw drivers per se. So because the drivers are a very crucial stakeholder here who ultimately decides whether he wants to buy a new electric auto or he wants to buy a new 4-stroke auto. A significant approach has been given on building their capacities and making the financial inclusion habits happening with them. And as I said, an equivalent amount of effort have been put in understanding the passenger preferences in both the cities. And a lot of pilots have been done, especially we're instrumental in promoting the adoption of electric auto rickshaws in Bangalore and in Bangalore and both in Chennai. And we also have done pilots of integrating auto rickshaws to metro rail network. So I'm very happy to say that with all of this effort, there are more than 30,000 drivers who are a part of the network already. And out of them, some 10,000 drivers have been intensively trained on financial inclusion and have been organized into a cooperative. And state level cooperative society of the drivers have been formed, which is a credit cooperative today. There are other trainings beyond financial inclusion that has happened, especially in terms of a code of conduct for organizing themselves. In the COVID, because we are living in a very unusual situation where safety in the commute is becoming a priority, and we have been in the last 10 days we have been intensively training drivers on a safety training and have been distributing hygiene kits to them just to take care of themselves as well as the passengers. As I was mentioning, a significant number of electric auto rickshaws that you see in Bangalore today, precisely 35 out of 57 auto rickshaws, electric auto rickshaws in Bangalore have been financed through the green finance instrument that was developed under the shifted already from less polluting options like 2-stroke engines to options including 4-stroke and electric auto rickshaws. And our behavioral change campaign has already reached 10 million people in Bangalore and Chennai. So in addition to that, a lot of research has happened, and TERI has been instrumental in doing all of those research, including regulatory and understanding the regulatory mechanism for promoting electric three-wheelers, best practices in IPT, green carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions from the auto rickshaw sector, etc., are some of the key publications that have been published. And since this is a public funded project, all the publications and all the researches that have been done during the course of this particular project is public, and hence and anybody who's interested can either access it from our website or can directly get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to share those insights with you. Coming to the agenda of today's meeting, today's webinar, in terms of sharing the key learnings from the project so far. I would begin with the crucial or the main mandate of this project, which was on switching to sustainable technologies. So it took us some time to really, really chart out those key points which we thought were really crucial for our audience today. And I have tried to consolidate them into 4 points for the benefit of all of you. One is that access to low-cost financing is very crucial when we speak about switching to sustainable technologies, and this is mainly because of the fact that the clientele that we are speaking about here is an auto rickshaw driver who was just above the below poverty line. And for him to make a crucial decision of whether buying an auto which is worth 3 lakh rupees is a very important decision. So for that reason, one of the solutions that we had came up was the green finance instrument that I was mentioning before, to make it as less costly as possible by offering a finance. That's one way we have looked at it. We also realize that a push and a pull strategy is both required when we speak about switching to sustainable technologies. And the pull factors could be using subsidies and low-cost finances, whereas the push strategies could be in terms of regulatory frameworks such as banning old auto rickshaws, or rather pushing a way in which the older ones could be retrofitted with a new technology. And we also believe that some amount of push can come from the users as well, because if users start demanding, or rather starts preferring, cleaner technologies, the demand the supply will almost fall in line. And with specific to electric vehicles, we also realize that creating infrastructure is very crucial, because the charging infrastructure is a very new concept, and people are getting used to it, and hence for assuming or estimating that an auto rickshaw driver would quickly shift is a myth, because he's very concerned about having adequate knowledge about the infrastructure in the cities. And also to add is the fact that we need to have very good products and excellent servicing, because there is always a tendency for the auto rickshaw driver to compare with what he is driving today, and he is expecting that he gets the same level of experience from the product as well. And here I'd also like to, because we are a project which was looking at sustainable consumption and production, we feel that circular economy models could be pushed, where we should focus a little bit more on the retrofitting and buyback schemes that could be done along with the manufacturers. And one of the schemes that one of our enterprise partner launched recently was to have a buyback scheme along with Mahindra. And Mahindra was buying back the vehicles and trying to push the new vehicle to the driver. The other thing is that there are customer anxieties which needs to be sufficiently addressed, because they are ultimately the one who's going to decide. And finally, a word that policy frameworks and processes could be made a little more simple, especially looking at the clientele groups that we are looking at, because they do not understand all of these complex messages. So that's one thing that we thought could be better done. And at the end, I would also say that somebody has to really stand up and explain why there is a need of switching to sustainable technology exists. Because what we realized during the course of the program is that while we as an consortium were pushing it very hard, we were still trying to find out the kind of people who could probably come along with us and having and putting a little more the strength to this whole narrative. So that's something that is very crucial when we speak about switching to sustainable technologies. Now, coming to the second and very significant part of the of the entire exercise, which was on policy and research. Again, while we realized that when we started work in 2016, we realized that there is a lack of data. And we were struggling with that quite a bit in the whole duration of the project. And we also realized that there aren't sufficient micro level research or city level researches which have been done to really push the agenda further in terms of why there is a need to switch to cleaner technologies. While everybody understands it as a concept, everybody acknowledges it as a concept, but there aren't enough researches done to really exemplify the need and the benefits of switching to clean technology. So I can say that the GHG emission research that we did as a part of this particular project was one of the single documents which was available to really establish the need of pushing to clean technologies. So the other aspect is that public policy, when we speak about the policy framework as such, it's a holistic, it's always a holistic thing. And today we have experts who can really speak about it. But my perception or our perception as a project is that, the transport goals of a city is a combination of several comfort, affordability, safety, besides it being clean and sustainable. So, all of these aspects need to be combinedly pushed and weighed and, disseminated to the different stakeholders, and then it becomes a complete exercise. And the other major important factor is that is decarbonization and decongestion a city level narrative or not? Fortunately for us, Bangalore has been very strongly propagating this, and because it is a city which needs strong measures on decongesting. But it has also been a city which has really came forth in terms of pushing the electric vehicle policy. So that has helped us quite a bit, I would say, because that is essential when we initiate a project like this in terms of aligning with the narrative that the city has. The other thing is there are multiple sector. What I understood is that there are multiple policy frameworks and multiple departments and other stakeholders who have a say on what happens in the auto rickshaw sector. So somewhere down the line, even maybe people like us, a project like us, have the bandwidth and rather have the resources to go out, search and understand this entire complex system. But for a driver or for any civil society organization to really understand this, it's slightly complex and it leads to confusion. And so we strongly feel that if policies and other frameworks could be made simpler and easier, maybe at the level of definition it might look complex, but for the sake of stakeholders who are really going to be a part of entire execution, it could be made a little more simpler. That would definitely help in making sure that there are a lot of people who are rallying behind an initiative like this. The third and the most, or the least, the last but not the least, is the end user preferences. We strongly believe that the end user preferences really matter, be it the auto rickshaw user or the auto rickshaw driver community. And I would like to quickly reflect upon what we learned, when we spoke to the rickshaw users. We had done an intensive research with the rickshaw users who are specifically looking at last mile solutions and those who are using metro rail in both Chennai and Bangalore. And we realized that their travel goals are a combination of cost, comfort, and time. And these three goals are the ones which decide what mode of last mile they choose. And unfortunately, sustainability of mobility option is very low on priority for most of them. And we also we also realized when we were putting up these pilots in Chennai and Bangalore of last mile services, generally customers are very, very price sensitive. They may just push everything aside if they find a good deal out there. But at the same time, people are generally very open to new pilots and new experience. There isn't much of a rigidity in terms of their acceptance to things like this. They are very open to share rides, which is something that we try to do both in Chennai and Bangalore. And we also realized that there is a good scope for dependable last mile service, which is still a challenge in both the cities. And especially in Bangalore, last mile service is still a pain for several people who travel regularly. And in the COVID times, safety is becoming a very big priority. We did some exercise with customers to understand how would they want to travel when they, when the lockdown eases, and safety became as one of the major priority. It was anticipated, but how strongly it has come up had that was a very big eye opener for them, for us. And we believe that along with all the conversations around sustainability and clean and everything, safety needs to be now put up there in terms of a key and crucial aspect. When it comes to the auto driver community, because this is a community with whom we worked very, very closely in the last 4 years, and we realized that the level of financial inclusion is very, very poor still among the auto driver community. They have a habit of earning daily and spending daily, and their savings habits are really, really poor. And they have this personal P2P lending or person-to-person lending that they rely upon, and that makes them vulnerable, especially in a situation like this. And unfortunately, we also realize that this is a community which doesn't have proper representation. Though there are more than 100 unions in Bangalore, they still do not represent even 50% of the drivers put together. So that is a slightly concerning factor when we speak about this community. But some of the very interesting and very positive things that came up was the enterprising nature of this particular group. One thing we always, as a project, we always have kept the fact that we consider them as entrepreneurs, and we feel that they're the one who's investing on the technology, and they know what they're doing, and they're quite inquisitive. They're well informed. They have been very forthcoming in terms of getting onto technologies and platforms like Uber, Ola, etc. And in Bangalore specifically, we have seen that a lot of drivers have already started using, or rather are using, e-wallets compared to what we had seen in Chennai. So that is definitely there. A lot of them are very enterprising and very forthcoming in nature. However, affordability of technology platform is limited. There are still many drivers in our own groups and other things who does not have a smartphone today. So even if they want to shift to something like a Ola or an Uber thing, or even we were trying to give some online trainings, it was difficult to reach to them because they still use an old feature phone. And finally, a very important aspect for us, a very big learning for us is, these drivers, whatever love and hate relationship we have with them, they would like to be treated as a stakeholder, not as a beneficiary. For them, the dignity is a very, very important aspect. And so here with this, I would like to conclude the key learnings that we had as a project, and we can listen to others. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Manju. In fact, Manju is so involved with the project that she has taken more time to explain, but she has beautifully explained what has been the outcome of the project. And to me, it is important in the one sense that apart from the using the sustainable technologies, and as of now, the only thing which is available is the electrification of the autos. She has also mentioned about the community of the auto rickshaw drivers, which normally we miss, because most of the time we look after the customer. But in what way these providers are there, of the services, and how they are functioning, that we normally miss. So this project has been very, very forthcoming to put forward their views also, and also that their problems what are they facing, and particularly during these difficult times, their situation has become worse than before. Now I invite Professor Sanjay Gupta to share his comments And Professor Sanjay Gupta, if you allow me, I will also request you to dwell on some of the very important points, like say, for example, how can we integrate the electric autos with the public transport systems for last mile and first mile connectivity? And of course, for this integration, who would be the or who could be the stakeholders? Professor Sanjay Gupta.
Yeah. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be a part of the experts here to convey our views. Though I don't claim to be an expert on per se, but then being in the sector for long, these are all interrelated areas. I think if one were to look pure there is no. I would just like to reiterate the important role the auto rickshaws in general play in the mobility in India. I often see them as neglected options of urban mobility. Nobody is looking after them simply because they are just running in individuals. They're not. So if one were to look into what needs to be done to improve their operations in future, I think we also need to look into how they can kind of promote the role in urban mobility, which is at the moment well spread over a lot of modes of transport. You have rightly said, you've got mass transport, you've got bus, metro, you've got conventional taxis, app-based, and then you've got auto rickshaws, and finally you've got the non-motorized transport. If one were to look into it, obviously I feel that auto rickshaws per se, and obviously the discourse will come on to the electric auto rickshaws, which probably needs to be encouraged for its inherent reasons. I think apart from the basic role of the auto rickshaws, which is primarily somewhere which can act as a basic role in trip lengths of about 5 to 6 kilometers where other transport systems are not available. The other important role, as you rightly said, is giving you a last mile connectivity to transit systems, mega cities or cities of tier 1, more than 4 million. And that is where we have been seeing, and I'm sure all of you are aware that ever since the metro operations have started in big cities, we've been finding that because of probably a kind of neglect in terms of last mile connectivity by the transit service provider, whether it is Delhi Metro or it is Chennai Metro to start with, they were more largely concerned with managing their own day-to-day line operations. You had this informal systems coming in to deliver the last mile services on their own, and they were never planned. So often you found, and you still are finding in Delhi, that most of the times they are actually moving around the metro stations, doing pick and drop, a short distance drop about 1.5 kilometers, because at the end of it, that gives them a very stable source of income. At the end of it, you have a very little dead mileage, and which becomes a very important point in IPT operations, particularly if an IPT runs for about 10 kilometers and it doesn't get a return trip on its way back, he has to wait, and that results in unproductive time, which an auto rickshaw probably spends. So probably first and last mile connectivity integration for an auto rickshaw becomes a very, very important ingredient for efficient planning. However, we still don't have too many good examples. I think in Delhi, you have got about 10, 12 stations where DMRC on its own has made arrangements at some of its stations where the electric three-wheelers are now kind of engaged to provide the first and last mile services. And same way, a few examples, what the other speaker said. But I think what probably would be very important is I would look in terms of looking into, first of all, what is the real demand of first and last mile. how much of that demand is really actually going by, because as I come out from first and last mile studies of Delhi Metro, about 40 to 50% trips are walkable. So people are just walking. And we don't want to actually also put too many auto rickshaws at a station, which leads to a lot of mess we often find around the metro stations. So what to me would be the first thing would be to get a fairly realistic estimate as to what would be the potential demand of auto rickshaws around metro stations, depending upon the footfalls and the movement pattern of people who access and disperse. The second obviously would be, once we know, we need to size up what would be the requirement of such auto rickshaws, which would be required to be engaged for such first and last mile. And obviously, once that is decided, then I think the third important point would be that how it be put into the system. So obviously, the ideal would be that the mass transit agencies, whether it is DMRC, Chennai Metro Rail Corporation, owns the system. Maybe they are subletting to a private operator based on a contractual agreement between the two agencies. But you need to have a ownership. If you don't have an ownership, then you cannot actually have a first and last mile efficacy. It will be all done very randomly. They will not be they'll not be arranged properly around the stations. We often find in Delhi, most of the stations, you find that auto rickshaws are just creating so much of nuisance actually. Put it around the stations, they just park themselves haphazardly. They just rush up to the customers to pick up passengers. So there is no sense of order. I think the sense of order is very important. And that sense of order can only come once we know how many people, how many auto rickshaws you need at different stations. And I think from there, we need to take it forward. Probably to me, we look up into innovative models of auto rickshaw planning in Delhi now. I'm just giving example of Delhi. Probably a time has come where we need to look into issuing to auto rickshaws, whether they're interested in doing a first and last mile, or they're interested in doing a flexible long haul routes, because that would be a way of actually designing two kinds of services. One auto rickshaw which is just doing pure first and last mile, the other one is doing line haul, so that you can actually regulate the whole system properly. As far as stakeholders are concerned, as the earlier speaker has said, that there are a lot of people would obviously be involved. I think the first important stakeholder would be the operator. You will have the agencies concerned, whether it's obviously at this point of time, I think it's a metro which will be for which first and last mile connectivity would be relevant. I don't think bus really needs a first and last mile, because by definition of bus stop, you actually are supposed to be within 400 meters of a stop in terms of accessibility, and you don't need a last mile to get you dropped at the bus stop. So it'll be purely a metro agency. And then you have other people who would support the auto rickshaws operations in terms of the charging infrastructure agencies. So where the auto rickshaw gets charged, it's a home charging or public charge. And then you'll have I would even put financing institutes which finance the auto rickshaws. They all should be part of the stakeholder set to kind of take it forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sanjay Gupta. Now I invite Mr. Shreenath. Mr. Shreenath is the Deputy General Manager of the BESCOM in Bangalore. Now, I would request Mr. Shreenath to especially tell us what are the initiatives taken by BESCOM for charging infrastructure in Bangalore, because this Manju is mentioned in her presentation that charging infrastructure is a very important requirement for electrification. Srinath?
Thank you. Thanks the Energy and Resources Institute for the opportunity. I've gone through the report of estimating vehicular emissions from auto rickshaws playing in Bangalore city. And so to the question asked to me, I would like to say the initiatives taken by BESCOM in providing the charging infrastructure. We understand this is the fundamental requirement for the growth of the electric vehicle in the city. And as you all aware that establishing a public charging station or any charging station is a de-licensed activity as clarified by Ministry of Power way back in 2008. So any interested parties who can, who wants to install charging station, he is free to do it. Nevertheless, we understand the poor participation of the entities to charging infrastructure for the reasons of poor visibility and also the ever-changing technology and the on the investment. So, really, this BESCOM has taken initiative to install the charging stations at various locations in city of Bangalore. As of now, we have provided 126 charging, which is evenly distributed across the city. So at a time, out of 126, we already have stations up and running. And these are primarily located in government offices like BESCOM office and other stakeholder offices like BDA, BBMP, BMTC, whose offices are spread across the city. This is only in the city, not in the outskirts. The main reason for choosing these office locations is, as you know, in city like Bangalore, it is very difficult to uh, get the land for installing the charging station. So as recommended by the high level committee, we formed a work group and involved all the other stakeholders department in the committee, and we convinced them to provide space to install the charging station so that BESCOM can buy the charging station through tenders and install it. And here now we have 126 charging units across city. And as far as the requirement of the charging specific to autos, three-wheelers, we have installed AC 001 charging units, 100 numbers of charging units. So at a time, 300 autos can be charged at a time. And taking this forward, we have also entered into a memorandum of understanding with NTPC and REIL, Rajasthan Electronics India Limited, and also EESL. So, who will be providing the charging structure, charging infrastructure in public domain. With that, we can have, we will be having another 150 numbers of charging units in maybe in another 1 year. So because of the COVID situation, we could not take up the survey. And once the survey is completed and once we get the consent letter from the stakeholders department, we will be installing the charging infrastructure, which will provide opportunity for the autos to charge. And it is not just autos. We can charge the four-wheelers, two-wheelers also. And we will be providing the latest charging units like CHAdeMO and CCS. Primarily for the autos. So what we have observed is the requirement is very less. Even if 125,000 plus autos which are in Bangalore city, which are playing in Bangalore city, are converted into electric autos, so that should not put much burden on the distribution network. As per our estimation, the requirement of the load as well as the consumption is less than 1% of the total requirement of BESCOM, which is very huge in terms of a few thousands of megawatts. So BESCOM is well prepared to provide the additional charging infrastructure to support the electrification of autos.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shreenath. Now our next panelist would be Mr. Abhishek Saxena. Mr. Abhishek Saxena in the NITI Aayog has been trying to pilot this electric transition to the electric mobility. Now, when Abhishek, my request would be that when you share your comments, you also mention, that what the government are required to do, because you are from the NITI Aayog as a advisory body. So what you would like, the governments to do to adopt electric autos to improve air quality in the cities, and whether these think tanks can help in these the designing of the enabling policies. Abhishek.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for this opportunity. And I would like to first congratulate Manju on a wonderful presentation on a very pertinent subject of the urban mobility that we are talking about. See, in our understanding, I think auto rickshaw actually forms the backbone of public and paratransit in the cities. It not only acts as a feeder or a last mile connectivity to metros or other public transport, but it also in most of the cities. And so when I say most of the cities, I mean most of the non-metros, it acts as a mode of a complete transit option. So in that case, auto rickshaws plays a very important role. I think Census 2011 also puts their usage up to around 3%, which is close to how much a car is used for travel to work patterns. I'd like to delve on a couple of aspects before I get into Sir's question of what government can do to promote electric auto rickshaws in the cities. I think one of the wonderful initiatives that I saw in your presentation was creating a cooperative for auto rickshaws. Uh, I think that is very important because they also need to come up as a homogeneous group and an information and an educational campaign that we as government bodies or other stakeholders in terms of NGOs or civil societies or think tank bodies want to run. So they have a single point of contact where an information exchange take place. So I think that in itself, forming a cooperative would act as a platform for that. I think that is very, very important, and that is a very commendable thing. The second point that I want to delve upon is an issue of financing. So you talked about getting some financing from NBFCs and other institutions. We've been trying to break through this problem for a long time on why scheduled banks are actually not lending to auto rickshaws. We know a couple of reasons, like they form a largely heterogeneous group. You know there are requirements sometimes of a collateral from them which they are not able to do. So like you right mentioned that they sometimes get into peer to peer lending or a person to person lending, and they are not able to access institutional finance as such, and the cost of financing according to go as high as 20-25% when a cost of finance for a car or a two-wheeler is actually available for a 9% at this point of time. So that puts an additional burden on them. And these are the true entrepreneurs that you have in the cities that actually run our cities. And not these group of people not being able to access finance is a big problem for all of us. The other point that I wanted to delve upon is regarding a charging infrastructure. Uh, uh, you know, uh, te- the studies, a lot of studies have been done on how electric autos are actually shaping up in the cities and how much of a capacity they have. So, a 7 to 8 kilowatt hour of a battery, which an electric auto has, does somewhere around 50 to 60 kilometers in the cities on a full charge. Uh, if I look at the travel patterns of autos across India, they do somewhere around 100-110. So it requires somewhere around a two charge. It requires a two full charge every day. Now that additional charge, if I talk from the perspective of an AC charge, would take somewhere around 2 to 3 hours, and that is something that auto rickshaws cannot afford during their hours of operation. So in a lot of cities, like in Gurgaon, we've seen propping up of options like battery swapping, where you just take out the battery, put in another battery, and you're ready to go. So you don't waste time. You don't have any extra charging overhead that you want to keep in mind before getting on the road. That is something that, I think the state agencies should also look at. With the charging infrastructure they are providing, there should be options of providing battery swapping infrastructure also, and that is a huge cost, in huge fixed costs in terms of agencies which are providing charging infrastructure. At the same time, it is a huge benefit for the auto rickshaw drivers, because uh, different estimates say that 30 to 40% of the cost of an auto rickshaw. So I have the numbers with me, like an electric auto rickshaw somewhere costs around 2.75 lakh, and and a CNG one, or a CNG one costs around 1.75 lakhs. So if I remove the battery out of the electric auto rickshaw, the cost actually drastically comes down to 1.5 to 1.6 lakhs. Where your upfront cost is much lower than the internal combustion engine ones, and your operating cost is much lower. So I think battery swapping is one of the options that agencies across India should look at as a business model also. So this is something that I wanted to point about regarding charging infrastructure. Now coming to what I think governments can do, and what actually specifically think tanks can uh, uh, come up in this space to propel the electric mobility revolution in electric autos. I think a lot of hindrance. So we've taken couple of steps to rationalize the so-called regime of the electric auto rickshaws. So we've removed the permit requirements for electric rickshaw. I think uh, I think some 21 states and union territories have already done it. So there is no requirement of permit for electric three-wheelers, which includes electric autos, electric rickshaws, and other things, uh, uh, including electric cars and electric uh, buses. So there is no requirement of permits. Uh, we've taken FAME subsidy gives a 10,000 per kilowatt hour of an incentive. Uh, you have a green license plate for them. The charging infrastructure policy has already been rolled out. Uh, the cost of power which is supplied to the charging station provider has been restricted to the 15% higher of the average cost of supply of the BESCOM. So BESCOMs also cannot lay out their extra losses to them. So these are some of the steps that has already been taken. But I think we've seen a huge proliferation of electric rickshaws. We have somewhere around 20 lakh electric rickshaws running on the road as of now. But I think there are some steps that needs to be taken into consideration, and that governments across different level, federal level, state level, and municipal levels have to do. So the first is looking at the mandate. So if I look at the mandates, I think there is a lot of push, and there's a lot of public discourse around building EV only zones in the cities. So you have a city center or you have a district center where only EVs are allowed. In that aspect, electric rickshaws can actually play a part. There could be some routes, there could be some areas where only EVs are actually allowed. So this could be one of the steps that can be taken. uh, I think uh, the biggest concern that a lot of auto rickshaw drivers, and especially when I talk about auto rickshaw drivers, I mean specifically in the sense of internal combustion engines, have to go through a dreaded fitness regime framework. I think there's an immense need to cleanse that system at the earliest. Everybody knows, and I think Shri Prakash sir knows much better than me, that that is the hotbed of corruption and uh, highly irregulated system that needs to come up. So I think the fitness regime that has to be streamlined. In terms of metros, I think specific parking lanes, dedicated parking, and dedicated charging infrastructure has to be provided at the metros. And in terms of payments, I think Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs have launched NCMCs, which talks about one nation, one card, National Common Mobility Card. But I think there has to be a payment integration between different modes of transport, at least at the city level. So I can use my card from metro to buses to electric autos. These all have to be integrated. I shouldn't be using different kind of a payment method. These are something that the government can do uh, at at the state, at the central level, at the state, at the and the city levels. At the central level, I think, especially with the COVID scenario, and we are trying to rebuild, and there has been a lot of push by agencies across the world to rebuild sustainably. I think it is an opportune time that we look at something in the lines of carbon tax, and see how you can put a small penalty on polluting vehicles and incentivize uh, cleaner and zero emission vehicles, which includes electric vehicles at this point of time. So a comprehensive framework in this regard has to come up from union ministries and union government, is what I feel. In another aspect, I think think tanks have a very important role to play. Because listening to the conversations from the other speakers, also, I think electric. I think autos as an ecosystem are actually the bad child of the public transport or the paratransit. Yeah. I think, if I remember correctly, it's a 2016 study done by TERI itself, where TERI has studied informal public transport modes in India in 5 cities, and there it came as a revelation that not a lot of them, uh, because hardly a minuscule of them are running outside the regulatory regime, and it's the perception that has come up that they are traveling in a vacuum and they are outside the regulatory regime, but instead most of them are actually following all the norms regarding pollution or permits or driver licenses and all of that, and fuels and everything. So they are not as bad as we perceive them to be. I think in that aspect, think tanks have a very strong role to uh, come up with a tangible studies and build up a public discourse around that three-wheelers are actually a cleaner mode of transport, and much cleaner than your personal transit modes like two-wheelers and four-wheelers. And I do not see any reasons why shared mobility like an Uber is actually a dear child of dear child in the public discourse, and uh, electric and auto rickshaws are actually the bad child of it. So I think that dichotomy has to be changed, and that discourse has to be changed. In that case, I think think tanks actually can play a very important role. Another thing is that if at a city level, there are a lot of regulations that I think Manchu already pointed out, that there are a lot of agencies which are actually uh, regulating the auto rickshaw travel. I think there is a need and there is a comprehensive study that should be done on how that the control of different agencies can be minimized, and how we can actually open up uh, the highly regularized ecosystem of electric auto. These were sir, my couple of points that I wanted to bring to the table.
Thank you very much, Abhishek. Now we are running out of time, so I can request Alekhya to be very very brief, and Alekhya, what my request to you would be that you can dwell on the how viable will be the change from conventional modes of transport to electric vehicles. And one more thing which you can dwell on is that how well is the power supply system in India equipped to handle the change towards electric mobility? Alekhya?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon to you all. I think first of all, I'd like to thank Sri Prakash sir and the all Namma project team members for giving us the opportunity to share the views in terms of auto rickshaws. So Actually, what I could gather from different learnings of the e-riskas that is going on across the country, mostly in small and medium towns. One of the key issues is to bring those e-riskas or the auto riskas into an organized sectors. When you talk about technology, when you talk about business models, when you talk about low cost financing, so everything comes or everything is viable when the sector is organized. So I'll say, couple of, five issues, which is, you can say the barriers to promote these e-riskas or the e-auto in India. So one of the major challenges is the technology. When I talk about technology, of course, I talked about the advanced batteries, and the flexibility of the fleets as compared with the IC engine. Like in your normal auto, you can have 5 or 6 people together, but in e-riskas or the electric auto, there are limitations of the carrying capacity. That is number one. That has to be addressed, and I think that can be addressed because the technology is quite mature now, and the cost of batteries are also falling down. We can also talk about lithium-ion batteries in e-riskas. Number two is the acceptance of the driver communities. I think one of the great examples set by Namma Auto project, what is run by TERI along with our partners. The understanding, the benefits of e-riskas, the kind of a training, those are very key to have the acceptance of the driver. The third would be kind of a enabling ecosystem. One aspects I think Mr. Saxena has already covered, because e-riskas or the e-autos, they are running 24/7. Either it can be rented one, or it can be owned by somebody else, or it can be owned by the drivers. What we don't want is, even we can see the outcome from the Nagpur study of Ola Mobility. The downtime is an issue. So to reduce the downtime of the e-riskas, because of you have put your vehicle into charging during daytime as well. So I think one of the key solution is battery swapping, and also you have to provide chargers. Like if you are talking about e-riskas providing last mile connectivity with the metro parking has to facilitate those charging system. If you are talking about e-riskas in smart city, there are many smart city corporations that are coming up with their own policies to enable auto riskas as a last mile options. They're not thinking, auto riskas as a parallel options. They are basically, facilitating those e-auto riskas as the last mile option or as the connectivity options. The number four would be, the affordability. When if is the e-riskas at present, the cost is affordable for a drivers to own the vehicles. So what government can do is to provide some kind of viability gap or some kind of subsidy. What I'm saying is, subsidy may not be on not good terms, but maybe some scheme at the city level, maybe a municipal corporation or maybe a state government can run to reduce this gap. We are getting a conventional vehicle as compared to the electric vehicles. Of course, battery swapping can substantially address this point, because the battery cost is huge at this moment. Of course, that and that this kind of the incentive can be there for initial 2-3 years. But once the battery cost is going down, then of course it is economically viable. And the last thing, what sir you have asked very categorically, what government can do. So of course the policy, because there are good policies, like what I read, some policies in Tripura. So that e-risha policy is way back in 2014. So how to enable the e-riskas, how to identify the routes, how to fix the fares, and how to create low emission zones. So those are the those are the interventions what government, even at the state level, at the level of smart cities, can be done. So coming back to the second questions regarding the impact in power system, as Mr. Srinath sir correctly mentioned, even we are talking about electric vehicles, not necessarily only with the e-autos or e-riskas. there will be hardly any impact in terms of the power requirements into the system. And because of the COVID situation, even we are having more than 370 gigawatt of generating capacity in India, and we are using hardly 160 gigawatt out of that. So we have many stranded or unutilized power available at the generating end. Of course, there will be localized challenges because when we talk about large scale proliferation of electric vehicles in general, issues could be there at the distribution side, but that can be managed through smart charging or control charging, or your e-rickshaws are doing kind of a battery swapping. So that can be done in a controlled mode through tariff incentive and other mechanisms. So I don't see, sir, hardly any impact on the power system if we move towards electric vehicle, because electricity utility at this moment, if you can see the numbers from the POSOCO for last 2 months in April, we are having a 30% less, due to lockdown and all, the less consumption as compared to the last year. And even in the May also, we are having 10-15% the reduction in the consumption because of this scenario. So anyways, utility companies are, I think they will be very positive towards the electric vehicles because it will increase their electricity use, thereby it could also improve their revenue. But having said that, cities like Delhi, where we are having a peak in the night, your electric vehicles or your e-rickshaws are tend to charge at night. Or so in those cases, we have to devise the functionality like smart charging, swapping station to be charged during off-peak hours, and you have to provide incentive through tariff regime. So I think that these are the aspects what I could cover.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alekhya. Now we have already crossed the allotted time. So this, in fact, many questions which have been given to us, we have tried to cover them and requested the panelists to cover them, and then they have been done also. Now, a couple of questions that had not been addressed, I will take. And one is basically the concern for the batteries, because what is the experience with the battery life? This is the one question which we have, and then whether any financing mechanism can be designed for battery replacement. This is one question which has come to us, and the one more question is that which is there that relating to the battery swapping. Now, battery swapping, that also needs that the battery should be standardized before we go to the next step. So this also, that can be covered. Then my request to the panelists would be that any of the I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So now this any panelist can address these questions. Okay, Alekhya.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, regarding your first questions regarding the battery cost of the batteries. So of course, yes. When we talk about e-auto or e-rickshaws, there are issues because of lithium and battery price. Even at the current stage, is little bit on the higher side. And I think, and in a total the vehicle, the battery cost is almost 40 to 50% of the total vehicle cost. So I think that is one of the issues which could be addressed through policy. And I think rightly what under FAME 2, the incentive is been provided on the battery capacity, even in terms of the e-rickshaw, e-vehicle, e-auto rickshaws as well. I think that this incentive has to go on until battery cost is coming down and the vehicle cost is as compared with the conventional vehicles. Of course, when you talk about battery swapping, the second question that you mentioned, the standardization will be the key. But what I would like to mention here, we have to have both system coexist. You are having a vehicle, of course, the cost will increase if you have the battery within the vehicle, as Mr. Saxena has rightly pointed out. But we should have a provision for both, because it's a choice up to the users. You cannot, dictate the OEM, or you cannot dictate the users whether he should go for swapping or he should own his own batteries. So there could be both the options. User will prefer maybe swapping. If you feel I have to drive more to earn more, so in that cases they will go to swapping stations. And maybe in the night time, if the facilities are having the charging options, you can also do that. So, but standardization would be an issue. I think we all discussed for last couple of years, including NITI Aayog. But of course, in e-rickshaws, the segments, the standardization is quite easier than the four-wheelers and the other segments. Sir, I think your mic is on mute mode.
Now there are a couple of questions relating to the project itself. Then I would request Manju to take them individually, and she can address to them directly through the email. So that will be, I think, better, because we don't have any time now. And I think this is the time to close, because we are already running almost about 15 minutes late, as I see this particular project, and I see, a lot of advantages with that we have had, from the having this project, because we were able to demonstrate that electrification of autos is possible, and it is now need of the hour, and we should go for the electrification in all the cities, not only particularly in bigger cities, but also in tier 1 and tier 2 cities, tier 2, tier 3 cities as well. And there is always, the public acceptance of the electric mobility, the way the e-rickshaws have mushroomed in many cities in the north. So I always think, that electric mobility has a great future, and particularly as far as public acceptance is concerned, it is there. So with this, I think now this time has come to end this panel discussion. I thank all my distinguished panelists to be with us today. And Mr. Patil could not join, because he has gone on an official tour. And that is why we were trying to get him on telephone as well, but we could not contact him. So thank you very much, all the participants as well as the panelists. And we now close this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you all of you.
Thank you, all of you. So on behalf of TERI, I would like to extend our thanks to Mr. Shri Prakash for moderating a session. I also thank Ms. Manju Menon for her brief and informative presentation on the project details. And I also extend my gratitude on behalf of TERI to our speakers and partners for sharing their thoughts and experiences as a way forward to replicate the project models in other Indian cities. And finally, thank you all for to all the participants for taking out a time on Saturday to join this webinar. I would also like to thank our IT team member, Mr. Sumit, for facilitating this virtual discussion. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend and stay safe.